I just remember like within a few months of my freshman year, coming back home from college for Thanksgiving break and looking at myself in the mirror in front of my parents and just saying like I don't recognize myself anymore. Like I need help. And just like having this breakdown, and this was after a long time of them like expressing concern, trying to get me to gain weight back, trying to like intervene, and me being in complete denial of there being anything wrong.
Well, welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Esfandiary, and this week I'm so excited because I have with me Carolina Salazar, who is the host of the Inner Growth podcast. She is also a certified health coach and hormone specialist, and she's a content creator. Welcome to the show, love.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I am too. And we've spent some time together because we're currently doing a pod swap. So we just recorded an episode for Inner Growth, which I would love for you all to go check out. We will link it in the show notes. And of course, we talked all about my inner growth journey with, psychedelics and plant medicine and open relationships. And you're a great
Oh,
interviewer.
thank you. It was such a powerful conversation. I'm so excited to share it with everyone in my community.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm excited for what they will think and the feedback that you'll get. And I'm so excited because this conversation is going to be completely different than what we just talked
Yes.
about. Yeah, I'm so inspired by your journey. I mean, we know very little about each other. We've got connected through a friend and actually someone that supports both of our shows. And when I started doing a little digging, I just love the work that you share and,
Thank you.
highlighting other people and their growth journey. But I really want to give you the opportunity to share about your life. You shared a little bit with me about your journey with health and, what you've grown through, when it comes to disordered eating and body shaming and things like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've never had this conversation with anyone before in my life, really.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm so inspired by your bravery too, to talk about these things and also to see that it's informed your career.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Thank
I just want
you.
to celebrate you first and excited to give you the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, when we first got connected, I was sharing with you that when I was struggling with my eating disorder in the past, I felt so alone. Like there was no one out there, at least in social media, really talking about this, about our relationship with our bodies, with body image, with self talk, with eating disorders, with food, all these things that, just like you're out here breaking taboos, I feel like in my own way, I'm kind of doing it too by
Yeah.
being vulnerable, like sharing my own experience, sharing what helps me, but also just about the reality of the world that we live in and all the conditions that are placed on us as women, on our bodies, on what we're supposed to look like, and then how that, kind of becomes our inner talk and it becomes the programming that we're fed and then can sometimes lead to very toxic behavior
Yeah.
for people.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
like I'm just showing up also with like the hopes that I'm being able to give to other girls or women what I wish I had had when I was
Mm.
deep in like my struggle.
Yeah, I would love to just go right back there
Yeah.
to, young you when maybe you don't even know at that point that you are struggling with food and with kind of just your body in general. How old were you when you developed these habits and how did it progress? And then how did it sort of
Yeah.
come to light?
Yeah, and there's been so many ups and downs. So, yeah, I'm excited to dive into it, but basically like kind of taking it all the way back to when I was a little kid, like I was always the petite late bloomer. Like I was always the like little girl, and like in Brazil where I grew up, there's a big culture around like using like I don't know if you say diminutives, I don't know what the word is, but it's like saying like little XYZ, like the
Yeah.
little boy, the little girl, and
Is it
in
like Ita?
it's Inha.
Inha.
So,
Okay. Oh, right,
everyone
because
used to call
Portuguese.
me Carolzinha, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
little Carol, um, which is how you pronounce my name, like, my nickname in Portuguese. And so I grew up, I guess, with my identity being formed around being the little one, like
Mm,
being the shortest one, the late bloomer, the one that's like the petite itty bitty like girl. And so
yeah.
I think I was fed that for so many years that it became what I associated myself as. And then when
Mm,
I really think about it, I think it was like the moment that I like hit puberty. So when I got my first period, which was at like I got it a little bit later. So I was going into freshman year of high school. So I think I was like 15 at the time. And I had just moved from Brazil to the US. So there was like so much change around me. And my body was also changing. And my boobs started to grow. And like my body inevitably became like curvier and more womanly. And that was a little bit over time. But I feel like at the time when that was happening, it wasn't like out of nowhere. So it didn't affect me as much, but towards the end of high school was when it really hit me, and I just remember there was one like semester. It was between the first half of senior year and the second half of senior year. I was like a little more stressed. I was just like living my life. Like I didn't have at this point like I did not have any toxicity regarding food. Like I would eat whatever I wanted. I didn't have restrictions. I didn't grow up very athletic either, so I didn't play a lot of sports. Like nothing like that. But I remember I had gained a little bit of weight because I think it was like college application season. I was like
mhm,
maybe eating a little bit more than I normally did. My body changed a little bit. And I just remember going to Brazil for like a Christmas vacation and asking a family member and being like, did I gain weight? Like, do I look different? And then this family member basically being like, yeah, like you just look a little bit more like I don't know if it was said like full or like filled out or like thick, like it was around those lines. And I think that
mhm,
was the moment where the self-consciousness just like got really activated and I was like, wow, like other people are probably noticing this change or like talking about it or thinking about it. And I started going into this loop of just feeling really ashamed or just really self-conscious.
mm,
And at the same time, I also was navigating, like, romantic relationships at the time, and I I guess I had, like, noticed that a lot of boys around me that, like, maybe I liked tended to like, those really skinny girls that, like, with no boobs, just, like, a little bit more, like, athletic looking bodies,
mm,
and, like, not what my body looked like at all, so subconsciously, I think I also created this story in my brain of, "I need to lose weight to be liked."
yeah,
By, like, my romantic interests.
mhm,
And so all these little stories that I was telling myself, and so that's when it really kickstarted. So I started going to the gym a lot, doing elliptical for, like, an hour at a time, like, almost every day, and it was, like, after school, so I would be missing family dinner, and I would be, like, skipping out on, like, certain activities to go to the gym. Like, it became very obsessive, and
mm,
I wasn't at first I wasn't seeing a lot of change, so then I started with food restriction, so I cut out basically, like, all carbs. No
wow,
bread, no pasta, no rice, like, no dessert. I was very, very extreme with it also, and I just remember going through the day and, like, wanting to eat those
yeah,
things, but just not allowing myself to. Like, if I would go to
yeah,
dinner with my family, they would say, like, "Have the bread," and I would fight them. Like, I would literally pick a fight out of it because I was so
mm.
attached to that control, and
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you really quick,
yeah.
are your parents or your family members noticing these changes?
So at first, yes, they definitely noticed the behavioral changes. So they definitely
Mm,
noticed that I was going to the gym more and like they noticed that I was like missing on dinner and like they would get upset. They were like, "Oh, we are like waiting for you." Or like sometimes they would wait and I would get home at like 9 p.m. and then we would have
mm,
dinner. So it also started affecting my relationships. But the problem was that I also started posting pictures on Instagram in my smaller body, and then I started getting compliments, and then people started
mhm,
saying, "Oh, you lost weight. You look great. You're so skinny. What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing because I want to do it too." La la la. So I started getting this external validation from it. And
yeah,
it almost fueled the problem because it started making me feel like, okay, if I'm getting all this validation now, do people not think I was pretty before? Like
mhm,
the conditional like validation, right? And feeling
yeah,
like, oh, if I gain this weight back, then I'm gonna lose this. And I'm gonna lose this like worth that I feel now or like attractiveness that I feel like I am exuding. And that's where I think the control was so strong because I didn't wanna lose that. And I mean, the root cause problem there was that I didn't think that way of myself, right? Like I didn't
Mm,
think that I was beautiful, worthy enough. And so I kind of relied on this external validation to be given to me. And I'm also like the oldest sister. I like grew up being like the perfectionistic straight A student that gets a ton of validation from like her academic achievements and like all these other
mm,
things. So I think it was a pattern in like other areas of my life as
yeah.
well, just like the perfectionism really. So that was like the very, very like low points where I was saying like I felt super alone. I really, really didn't like myself and I just had a very low sense of self-worth. So that was like going into college. And I think the trickiest part was the validation that I was receiving. And it's because as a society we glorify weight loss.
Yeah.
We glorify like, oh my god, that person's like transformation, like, oh, if she went from like, I don't know, like not to hot. Like there's just
Mm,
so much of a culture around this.
yeah.
And I think even within like my culture being like a Latina person in Brazil and Latin America, like there's a lot of normalization of New York noises in the back, all the ambulances.
Love it.
But, like, there's a normalization of commenting on other people's bodies, on celebrities' bodies, or people in your family, calling people, like, fat as, like, a endearing thing, like,
Mm,
gordo or gordita, like, it's super normalized in, like, Latin American cultures, and so I think that also is, like, a part of it because even within my immediate family, there would be comments on like, "Oh, did you see that celebrity? Like, she's a little fat now." Or like, "Oh,
mhm.
did you see Aunt XYZ lost weight? She looks so much better." Like,
Right. That's
so
the backdrop conversation is that, like, people's weight is important to who they are and, like, what they're worth. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly, and so that was where, like, the turmoil really like was coming from, I think, as well, and like what was fueling all these unhealthy behaviors and thought patterns and beliefs. And going into college, like I was also going through a major transition. I was scared of gaining weight there, and I was trying to like reverse the freshman 15 and like lose 15 pounds. So if I gain it back, like that was me justifying it. Oh, if I gain it back, then I'm like neutral.
Mm,
And the problem was that like I got to college and it got even worse because not only was I super stressed out about the food thing and like the exercising thing, I also was living on my own for the first time, living, completely by myself, trying to figure out how to be responsible for like
yeah.
things I didn't have to do before.
Where did you
How
go to school again?
I went to UPenn.
Okay. Yeah, in Philadelphia, which is
Yeah.
where I'm from for everybody listening, and yeah.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly, and so there was all this change. I just remember, like, I think I was just, like, so stressed out. I went on birth control because I had lost my period, and I was trying to, like, gain it back using birth control, which, I mean, is again,
Yeah.
like, not looking at the root because why did I lose my period, right? Like,
Right.
that's, like, a huge red flag. So, I just remember, like, within a few months of my freshman year coming back home from college for Thanksgiving break and looking at myself in the mirror in front of my parents and just saying like I don't recognize myself anymore. Like I need help.
Mm,
And just like having this breakdown and this was after a long long time of them like expressing concern, trying to get me to gain weight back, trying to like intervene and me being in complete denial of there being anything wrong.
mm.
Until it got to this point in this Thanksgiving break where I just kind of owned it. I was like, "Yeah, actually, like, things are not okay, and
Yeah, and I need help.
I need help."
That's so
And
brave.
so, yeah, yeah, it was, like, definitely a big transformative, like, changing point almost.
Mm. Was there
But
a
then
moment that that happened, or was it just seeing yourself in the mirror, or was there
no,
something
like, I
leading.
was in the bathroom, and I guess I was, like, in my parents' bathroom, like, they were there. I think I was just, like, in my workout clothes or something, like a workout top, and I just remember, like, my hair had fallen out so much, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror, like, trying to put it in a ponytail or fix myself, and then just crying, like, bawling my eyes out in front of my mom and my dad and just saying, like, "I don't recognize myself anymore." And I remember too that, like, right before that break, I had gone to a party, and I don't know, I guess, like, I fell or something, and, like, there was, like, bruises on my legs from that fall, and,
Mhm.
like, the bruises were not healing. because I was so undernourished where
Yeah.
my legs, it was just like just there, you know? And I just knew that I was so weak and that I needed to gain the weight back. And so that's when I started working with a nutritionist to like be on like a weight gain protocol basically. But the problem was that I didn't see anyone for like the mental health side of it.
Yeah. The
And at
root.
the root, like any eating disorder or disordered eating pattern comes from your thoughts, your beliefs, your mindset. And I wish I had done that work earlier,
Mm.
but everything happens for a reason. I really believe that, and like the timing had to happened for a reason. So I started getting the weight back, and I'm a very strong-willed person. So
Yeah.
when I set my mind on like I want to get better, I like
Mhm.
committed to
Yeah.
gaining the weight back and
Because
doing what
you're
the nutritionist was telling me to do.
we're not in a recovery as a perfectionist yet. You are still a perfectionist.
Oh, still a perfectionist, very,
Yeah.
very much so. And I always like wore it
So
as
you're
a
like,
badge
"I'm
of
gonna get an A
honor.
on this weight gain."
Exactly, exactly. It's like I'm gonna do it fast.
Yeah.
And yeah, but obviously, like as I start to do that, a lot comes to the surface. Like
Mhm.
especially if you've been through a restrictive pattern or time of your life, breaking those restrictions can feel really scary. And I think all of that like self-worth conversation kind of rose to the forefront again as as I said, I was really scared of people noticing that I gained weight back and
Yeah.
commenting on it and all of that, so I had to really face that. And I think what really motivated me was like knowing how disconnected I was from like any true like well-being in my body. So I think that like motivated me to keep going even
Yeah.
through those like uncomfortable feelings. But my relationship with my body, like it actually didn't get better right away. So I just remember like the year after that, I still had a toxic relationship with exercising where I still went through patterns of guilt and shame and wanting to like exercise from that place, right?
Mm.
If I and this happened a lot, like let's say I like smoked or something, like smoked weed, I would like eat a little bit more and then the next day I would feel so guilty and I would beat myself up for it.
Yeah.
And then I would try to overcompensate by like again doing the elliptical or like working out really hard. And so that kind of continued. And I guess I went through this period where I was smoking a little bit more and I was binging, I guess, a little more. Like I wasn't like binging and purging or anything like that, but I was definitely eating more food in a timing that I normally wouldn't eat it with some sort of frequency, which I realized is what binge eating is basically.
Yeah.
And so, and I learned that like I only put that together like a year later, but essentially my relationship with my body still wasn't at its like best for a little while until lockdown. When
Okay.
lockdown happened, I started therapy, like, pretty much right away. Like, I had already started seeing, like, my campus therapy services right before 2020, and then I went abroad, I had to pause it, and then they were doing it virtually. So I reached
Mhm.
out to my therapist, and I was like, "Hey, can we meet on Zoom?" So we started doing these sessions. I remember that was really when I started doing a big deep dive on this discomfort that I felt and the shame and the self-judgment and like
Mm.
how I was labeling foods as like good or bad and then feeling like there was this morality with food and if I ate a bad food I was a bad person and the judgment and then
Yeah.
worrying about this other judgment coming from everyone around me when really like my self-judgment was the loudest.
Mhm.
So I think that was really I just remember like when I started really doing the work. But then again, it doesn't kind of stop there because I discovered the world of holistic wellness and I started diving into it, really doing a lot of unlearning. I was not only doing this kind of a learning, I was also having my spiritual awakening. I started meditating.
Mm.
I started doing like chakra meditations and reading a ton of like personal growth books, which I had never read before. And there was all this other stuff like unlocking and I
Yeah.
was also doing a course at the time called Becoming the One, which is about like
Mm.
have you heard of Rising Woman before?
Yeah.
It's like her course
Mhm.
and it's about like basically becoming the one for yourself and healing your relationships and being conscious within your relationships. So I was also doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
And as I came into the world of holistic wellness, I almost went towards like the super orthorexic kind of side where I was trying to pursue health to an extreme. So I went to the
Mm,
opposite extreme where I was like cutting out dairy, cutting out animal meat, cutting out like basically all foods that are considered bad, but being like,
right.
no, I'm just doing it for like health.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a family that eats a lot of red meat, and like dairy is a big
Mhm.
part of our like Brazilian culture. And I got kind of like my blood exams started kind of having like a lot of vitamins and things that my body was depleted of.
Yeah.
I was
And
having a lot
because
of blood
yeah.
sugar imbalance. Like
Mhm.
it
You've gotta
wasn't
replace those foods with things that I mean, I was a pretty strict vegan for a long time, like 7 years, and, yeah, you can't pull all that stuff out without replacing the things that will nourish you so you can get your iron and get your B12, and, uh,
exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly.
you
So
went to the other end of the spectrum.
yeah, and I was like, I'm so healthy, right? I was like on this like high horse of, which is also a not symptom, but like a signpost of orthorexia, which is like judging
Mm,
other people's eating choices.
yeah.
And if they're not as healthy as you, like they're doing worse, or like they don't care
Mhm.
about their health as much. And like that was what I was really experiencing in 2020 and like into a little bit of 2021. And then really it was like after I graduated from college, moved to New York, started working, kind of like was reintegrating into like the real world after being just living with my family for like a whole year. That was also so much change and like a lot of reintegration work and like reparenting
Mhm.
also. And through that, I like had a little sober period where I also cut out alcohol, and I eventually like over time like added alcohol back in, and then I also started adding in these foods that I had taken out. So I started with red meat because my acupuncturist recommended it for like my cycle being more regular,
Mhm.
which at this point, like I was already off of birth control, but started with red meat and then like turkey and then chicken and then dairy and then I like just added everything back in. And the funny thing is that it was only after I like basically removed all of these rules and was like, you know what, if I want to eat a burger, like I'm gonna eat the burger. Or if I want to have a drink with my friends and I want to have the marg tonight, like I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna like have fun and enjoy food as like something that to me is so pleasurable and a source of connection and creativity, and really let myself like have actual balance. Like it was
Yeah.
only when I truly didn't have any conditions on it or any rules and I was like, yeah, if I want this, like I can have it. Like I am allowed. I feel like that's when really things kicked into gear and then my relationship has gotten better and better over time with food since
Wow.
then. So that's kind of
Beautiful.
like the long story.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I love just the way that you tell it because you're sharing all of the like low points and the high points and the learnings and kind of bringing us along for the full journey. So I really appreciate it. I just love kind of where you got to at this point in your life. It sounds very much like intuitive eating. Like I'm
Mhm.
going to let myself have what I'm craving, and let that be the harmony.
Yeah.
I'm so curious. We'll kind of go there, and then I have some other questions I want to work backwards. But
Mhm.
as you have found yourself now in this place of no restrictions, what do you find that your diet is mostly made up of? And everyone's different. So I'm not asking this with the intention of being like, oh, this is, she's found the healthy way. Like everyone needs different food and, so but I'm curious
Yeah.
for you, like what did you find, and if you want to give like some generals or percentages of like what most of your plates look like.
I love that question. And I think what I kind of do now more than anything is like follow like a principle in the sense of
Mhm.
like my principle is balance, right? And so from a hormonal perspective, which has also been a part of my story, just like learning about hormones from the perspective of our menstrual cycle, but also in general, for our hormones to be balanced, we need to have balanced blood sugar. And so the
Mm,
way to have balanced blood sugar is to have all the macronutrients in your plate. And so I'm really big on protein actually. So I always focus on, do I have a source of protein in this meal? And then I make sure that I also have fiber and healthy fats in it,
yeah.
or like fibrous carbs. And
Mhm.
so pretty much that's like the baseline that I follow. And then my plates will kind of vary So, like, just an example for breakfast, I really like doing like Greek yogurt with a little bit of protein powder, which gives you like 30 grams of protein. And then I'll add like berries, chia seeds, granola, or oats, and just make sure everything's in there. Or you can do like a cottage cheese and avocado toast with like an egg on top or
Yeah.
something like that. And then for my meals, I love, like, nourish bowls, so I'll do those a
Mm,
lot where it's, like, there's a base of, like, some green, and then I'll throw in, like, sweet potatoes or rice or quinoa, and then I'll do, like, chicken or salmon or tilapia or, like, some type of protein there, and usually some, like, air fried or, like, baked veggie. So
yeah.
that's kind
Oh
of,
my
like,
gosh, we love our
more
air
my lane.
fryer.
What?
We love our air fryer.
Yes, we love our air fryer over here. So, it, like, literally changes the game, like, it's so good, but that's kind of, like, the overall baseline, but that
Mhm.
said too, it's like, if I'm going out to eat, like, I cannot control what's gonna be in the kitchen, so
Right.
I'm just gonna pick what on the menu seems good to me in that moment,
Mhm.
and I've recently been breaking a lot of my food fears because, for example, like, I went to a cafe literally last week, and there was a few options, right? And, like, old me would have said, "Oh, like, I need to be healthy, like, let me go for, like, the salad with chicken." But in that moment, like, what I was really into was the chicken panini. And, like, I
Mhm.
wanted the sourdough and the like,
Yeah.
and it still was gonna be balanced because there still was gonna be the protein
Mhm.
and all of that, but I listened to myself and I ordered the panini, and then I felt so good and I felt so happy, but it has come from a conscious effort too of, like, listening to my, like, inner wants and needs and realizing too when those fears come up and
Yeah.
challenging them a little bit.
It sounds like you're bringing a lot of joy into the conversation of you and your food and your health. And that's like helping to minimize these fears because you are very close to this entire experience. This is not that far away that you were still experiencing a lot of these, habits and symptoms. So to be so,
Yeah.
I think, new on this journey to balance and harmony, to have that bravery, to still have the fears come up, but you're like, I'm actually going to choose this because it sounds like it's going to bring you joy. And having that is so healthy. And also, like, what you are feeding yourself is like, this is the experience that I want, rather than going down the road of, I'm going with this because I think I should. And so, like, now I'm kind of going off of a fear based decision or letting my restriction
Yes.
dictate my choices. Because, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but and I don't have a lot of experience with these types of things. I really never have had any disordered eating tendencies. But the one thing that I know is I used to well, actually, maybe I do. I used to make myself feel bad after eating certain things when I was younger, but it was very mild and it actually never dictated me not doing it. So I didn't have swings. But I did learn that, like, when you do that, it's like it actually just mitigates any kind of nutrients that you can bring into your body with that food anyway. Like,
Mhm.
this is extreme example, but there are like studies of, monks who will like meditate and pray over like McDonald's burgers and like eat them, and like, even though they're probably the worst, like, thing sort of nutritionally that you can like put in your body, they're like not affected by it at all. And like,
Wow.
for whoever is going to go research this, don't quote me, but I really believe that that's such an interesting example of, our relationship to food, but also our like energetic response to like what we're putting in our body. If you
100% because our emotional and energetic well-being is such a big part of our health. Like, it's
Mhm.
not just food and exercise, it's everything, and you're 100% right. Like, that is it. For me, food is genuinely a source of joy. Like, I freaking love going out to a meal with someone is like my love language. Like, going and
Yes.
trying a restaurant or, like, having a picnic or hosting a potluck or cooking
Mhm.
a really yummy meal for my fiancé and I or whatever it is that we're doing, when there's food involved, 1, it's a source of creativity for me. 2, it's just like I love tasting different things and trying different things, and for so many years, I cut that out of my life, like, I got in the way
Yeah.
of my own joy, and I just made a post about this recently. think it was like 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and I said I'm just like done. Like I am done with letting restriction and rules and this endless pursuit of looking a certain way or of fitting this like societal standard of thinness get in the way of my joy. Like my
Yeah.
joy is more important to me than any of that.
Way more important. It's like, what else is life about? Honestly, at the end of the day, I think this is so amazing and incredibly wise. We were joking on your show. You're a lot younger than I am, and you have lived so much, though, and you're so intuitive and wise about these things. And I think you're going to help so many people who are struggling with these things. I'm curious, were you already studying health and nutrition? Like, was that your decision going into school? What did you end up like? Was it once you realized that these were big issues for you that you switched into this
Yeah.
profession? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you so much. That means a lot. And I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we're able to help people who are maybe struggling and who feel really lost and alone in their struggle too. But yeah, so I went into college not really knowing what I wanted to study, and I was always a very creative person. Like I
Mm.
grew up wanting to be a video editor and a graphic designer and just like all of these different creative pursuits were a passion of mine. Like I used to do photography. I was like the yearbook photographer girl. Like I was always like
Yeah,
that
you were doing
person.
content creation way
Yeah,
back when.
exactly. Like I was like making photo booth music videos with my friends when we were like 12 and like
Mhm.
editing it on iMovie, and like that was my like favorite pastime. But yeah, I was basically like I think coming into content creation feels really aligned to me because it's a merging of like all my different passions where it's like communication, which is actually what I went into college then deciding to study with all the other creative avenues I liked. But I went into college studying communications, transferred into the business school, so I ended up doing marketing and communications, but ended up taking a bunch of like really businessy classes like finance, accounting, like all these ones like requirements that you have to do, super analytical. So like that wasn't totally my vibe, honestly. Aside from like the more creative classes that I did, I also loved like some psych classes that I did. But I
Mm.
remember between my freshman and sophomore year was when I was considering switching into the business school, and I really remember considering also switching into the nursing school because they had a nutrition major. So I remember talking to my mom and being like, "Should I do nutrition?" But I don't know, I guess that the, like, calling at the time, like, it wasn't as loud,
Mm.
and I didn't put the 2 things together
Yeah.
between, like, my relationship with food and, like, going down that path. But halfway through my junior year, like going into my senior year, was when I was having all these awakenings and like learning a ton about holistic living and holistic wellness. And then my therapist at the time told me to look into IIN, which is the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And
Mhm.
that's where I did my holistic health coaching certification. So I just did a lot of learning on my own and then went down these other trainings to get certified and to become a coach and to do my hormone specialization also. So that came a little bit later at a point
Cool.
where, like, unfortunately, I couldn't switch my major and, like, go down this path
Yeah.
in my undergrad.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I don't think
Yeah.
any of us end up doing what our degree is ever
Like,
in.
we're 18, like, when we go into college, like, we're so young, it's really hard to know exactly what you wanna do, and again, there's a lot of societal programming and conversations around what is a prestigious major, what you should do,
Mm.
and, like, I feel like I kinda fell into that, where, like, I
Yeah.
wanted to make my parents happy, and, like, that was more important to me than, like, actually, like, truly owning my creative desires at the time.
Right. Yeah. What do you spend most of your time doing now?
Right now, I'm working for myself fully as a content creator, so it's been 4 months since I started doing this full time, so it's been cool to kind of create my own schedule and, like, what I spend my energy on. But I feel like most of the time what I am spending my energy and my time on is communicating, and that
Mhm.
will come through, like, making TikToks, editing them, editing reels, my YouTube channel, which I'm growing this year, and the podcast, which is, like, my baby and, like, my favorite thing in the world, and I feel like that is just such a source of joy for me as well.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of my time on that. And then now I have also like a team, which is pretty great and helps, make all of it a little bit more balanced and helps me be able to do more things with the messages that I want to share. But I have worked
Yeah.
with clients before one on one. I just am not working with anyone right now because I kind of want to create like a full out program.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a while to really get down to what I wanted to spend my time talking with my clients about.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
beautiful. Well,
yeah,
take your time. I'm excited. I'm sure whatever you put out is going to be incredible, and
thank
I
you.
can't wait to share it. So I want to ask you because you sort of dropped in a little bit about like how this affected your relationships with your family members, and you are the oldest, in your family, of your siblings. How has this affected those relationships, and how have those relationships evolved now that you're in this really, place where you have a healthy relationship with your food and body?
Oh my gosh. I feel like it affected my relationship with my family in so many different ways. And when I started my therapy journey, at first I was working with like my college therapy services, and then eventually I got like my own therapist, which is the therapist that told me about the coaching program. And my therapist specifically is focused on basically family relationships.
Mhm.
So it was really cool because I got to do a lot of work on my relationship with my parents and my brother and all of that through therapy as well. But when I was like in the deep like hole of my eating disorder, like I said, like 6 years ago,
Mhm.
I kind of described, it was affecting my relationship with my family because I just wasn't very present at home, and I was so much in my head and in my own world that thinking about other people around me just like wasn't something I did.
Mm.
I think I was very self-absorbed and like
Do you have brothers or sisters or
I have a
both?
one younger brother.
Okay.
Yes, and my younger brother is like super athletic, like just like a natural like athletic person, which is very different than I was growing up. But yeah, I think, like, just within my family, like, that was kind of how it was around that time, but then later down the line, like I was just describing when I was more in the orthorexic period of my life, I feel like it affected my family dynamics a lot too because I didn't wanna eat the food that my mom cooked,
Mm.
so I would, like, make my own separate food, and sometimes, we would be at family dinner and I would like complain about the food that my mom made or whatever it was, but it was just definitely a big way that it affected my relationship, especially with my mom. And I think there was also a part of me when I first started doing a lot of healing work that got really like mad at my parents and like I kind of resented them for
Mm.
like making comments about other people's weights
Yeah.
or for just like their own like, not so necessarily like balanced relationship with these things,
Right.
and more so just like I was angry at like the whole cultural part of
Yeah.
it. Why is it so normalized for us to comment on
Mhm.
other people's weights? And I've had to have a lot of conversations with my family over time about these things.
Yeah.
And if they made comments about my own body, my own like physical changes from where I was at in my journey with food or my body or other people's bodies, like I started getting really triggered if
Mhm.
I heard them saying like, "Oh, someone else looks really skinny," or what I was describing before, like if a family member changes or if a celebrity had lost weight, and I would say like, "You do not know the
Right.
reality of why that person lost weight." Like that person could be in a really negative or like unhealthy moment of their lives, and that's just like not okay to say. So I've had
Mm.
to have a lot of conversations of around that, and for a really long time, I was getting really triggered, and it
Yeah.
kind of pushed them away. Like, it created a lot of distance between me and my parents, and I think over time, I've just had to realize that they're also not perfect and
Yeah.
that I don't have to change them and that like I love them and I don't want to place conditions on our relationship and that it's okay for them to be in a spot whether it's spiritually or in their health journeys that's different than me. And I don't have to
Mm.
get so triggered because I the more that I've gotten so rooted in like what is my truth, the less that has affected me because for a long time I was afraid that if I heard them saying certain things, like, it would make me worried again about the
Right.
self-judgment, the external judgment, or it would make me I feel like it was still being formed in my own beliefs, so I was afraid that it was going to, like, that my belief system that I was forming was gonna disintegrate if I
Yeah.
let myself get affected by, like,
Because you were
their
still in
own
that
thoughts.
fragile place in your journey.
Exactly, so I, like, kind of pushed them away for a while, but the stronger I've gotten in my own belief system and what I want for myself and, like, the relationship I want with food and with my body, the less it started to affect me, and then the more I've also been able to cultivate acceptance with my parents.
Beautiful.
But it didn't
Wow.
really affect my relationship with my brother very much, it was mainly just my parents.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that it
Yeah.
really comes like full circle because that's the thing. What you're describing is like putting these healthy boundaries in place and speaking up for yourself and saying like it's not okay to talk about like that in front of me or however you did
Mhm.
that and that can create so much distance in families and because I imagine I have the same thing with my parents in different experiences in ways that they are. And when we do that, you know, when we're just learning what our triggers are and figuring out like what our, traumas are and the things that we're going through, we don't realize that like it's so unintentional on their part or subconscious, most of the time. And this is not for everybody. I'm sure that there are, parents who aren't the best or know on some level that what they're doing is wrong, but for the most part they're just trying to do their best and
Yeah,
they're
and, like, I
basically
didn't grow
regurgitating
up
what they learned from their parents.
exactly, like, I didn't grow up with parents that were like I don't know if you've ever heard of, like, the almond bomb, like, people talk about that on TikTok sometimes, like, the mom that's like, "Yeah, like, eat 3 almonds and, like, you won't be
Oh no.
hungry." Like, my mom wasn't like that, like,
Yeah.
my parents are healthy, like, they, like, prioritize, like,
Mhm.
home-cooked meals, and they're very wholesome, but they still have, certain things that they've learned, I think more so from, like, the overall societal conditioning
Right.
of, like, what you were saying in the very beginning of the episode, like, your weight is important, like, being
Mhm.
thin is important, etcetera.
Yeah, I mean, and we live in a society where like a woman's body and her looks they're constantly like, public debates and knowledge and curiosity about every single move that she makes can in relationship to like the way that she presents herself right in society. Then it's I mean, you have to live under a rock to not be affected by that as someone who presents as a woman. And I just think,
Mhm.
to circle back to like your evolution, it's really beautiful to get to a place where you've grown so much and done some of that internal healing work to the point where you're like, okay, now I'm realizing that this is actually like my stuff. And I can start to peel back the boundary because I've worked on it. And, the boundaries are so
Yeah,
important to put in place for when you need them and when you are in a place where like you can't be triggered because it's unhealthy for you and it's too harmful. But then once you like get to that place where you're like, okay, I've created stability and harmony and I've got myself, then you can like reconnect with those people and heal those relationships. And I
yeah,
think just think that's it's very like self-aware and you've evolved to that place where you're like, okay, now I can re-engage and I'm not as triggered. And
yeah,
it's not my job to change my parents' perspective because for them it's not an issue. And
yeah,
I just think that's so cool to get
and
to
even
that
thank
place.
you, and I was gonna say even more broadly too, like, it's also changed my friendships, like, I think I've, over time, had to distance myself from certain people in my life, and it wasn't, like, necessarily intentionally, but it was kind of organically that it happened, where, like, people in my life that maybe were, like, previously my friends that would say, "I'm so fat," or, like, be in this, like, diet culture mindset,
Yeah.
like, those friendships have naturally fizzled, and then I've attracted people into my life that come from a similar perspective and that have this understanding of, like, I don't wanna have this toxic relationship with my body.
Mm,
It's evolved so many of my different relationships, but as you mentioned, like, the more inner work I've done, the more I've grown internally, the more I've been able to show up strongly in this area of my life and bravely, and it's not like I'm perfect either because as I think you said this on my podcast, where you said this earlier in this episode, but healing is like an onion, right? It's like we're
Yeah.
peeling layers and ultimately getting to like a really strong core. But with even now, like I can think of an example, like, and I don't think he would mind that I would share this, but the other day I was at lunch with my fiance and I broke one of my food rules, which was the first time that I did this, and I ordered a sandwich at brunch. Normally, I would get, like, an avocado toast because it's just, like, one piece of toast, and I was like, "No, you know what? Like, I want the ciabatta bread and, like, the egg and the onion and the I want everything." So I ordered a sandwich, and he got, like, the little breakfast platter that comes with, like, the eggs, the bacon, whatever, and his platter was, like, a lot smaller than mine, and I think he was hungry. So I like, my big sandwich comes, and I'm like, "Ah," like, I'm, like, devouring it. I'm like, I just went on a run. I was, like, so hungry.
Yeah.
So like, eating my sandwich, and he's finished with his plate, and he turned or, like, halfway done, and he was like, "Oh, like, that's a pretty big sandwich, like, are you gonna eat all of it?" And I got super triggered because I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh," like, now I feel bad, like, now I feel like, "Oh my god, like, am I eating too much?" And then there's
Mhm.
all this conversation around, like, "Oh, you have to always order the smaller plate than the guy," or, "Order the
Yeah.
salad always, la, la, la."
It all
And so
came
I had to
rushing
tell
back,
him,
that
like,
inner
that, like,
talk.
really triggers me, and, like, little do you know, here I am, like, breaking a food rule right now in this moment, and then, like, this was, like, almost like the universe testing me really, like, how strong are you in, like, breaking this food rule right now? And was literally just saying that because I think he was hungry and he wanted a bite of my sandwich, or he, like, wanted me to offer him some of it because it looked so good,
Yeah.
and that was, like, a moment of, like, just navigating that trigger, and then, like, in the moment, like, setting the boundary and saying, like, "Hey, like, I know you probably didn't mean it in that way, but you saying that, like, triggers something inside of me," and then having these conscious conversations in
Yeah.
the moment too when it comes up.
Mhm. Beautiful. I was actually gonna ask you, so because you mentioned you just got engaged, so congratulations.
Thank you.
How, through all of this, because I know you've been with your partner for a while, and, we haven't talked about your relationship much on this show, and this whole show is about relationships. I'm curious, maybe just to highlight, um, what has been the biggest growth, inside of your relationship with, your journey with food?
Like, how has it
Yeah, how
affected
has it
my
affected
romantic
it? And
relationship?
yeah, mhm.
Yeah, because when we started dating, I was going through that orthorexic
Yeah.
period, and so when we started dating, I remember he would be really worried, like, if we would go out to eat or something like that, that he had to, like, make sure that there was no dairy, no like, there was, like, a vegan option, and that was, like, the part that I was vegan, it was very short-lived because I introduced eggs and fish pretty early on after I was vegan. But that was, like, the very beginning of our relationship. But I think the more that I've grown in my concentration, the more that I've shared my journey online, like, really openly, he's very aware of it. We've had a lot of conversations around it. He's been the most supportive. And especially in these moments where my mom or my dad like said something that hurt me and that triggered me and that made me feel really sad and like triggered that inner child, like he was always there, like he always held
Mhm.
me. And he's an amazing communicator, so he's always held a lot of space for us to communicate. And I'm a feeler, like I feel a lot, like I have a Cancer moon in astrology. And my partner, he's like not the most emotional person, but he's very good at like hearing me out and
Yeah.
creating that space for me to vent and to share and just to be. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I think communication is probably the biggest strength in our relationship. And I think that's what's facilitated a lot of growth for us as a couple, is being able to talk about these things and me feeling safe. And
Mm.
my partner has like a super healthy relationship with food. Like he'll eat whatever he wants. He does not have food rules. He's not one of those guys that like works out like a ton and like is super into like fitness. So he's almost like very disconnected from like wellnessy things.
Mm.
So he kind of counterbalances me a little bit too. And seeing him have such a freedom filled relationship with food where he follows his cravings and he's a super intuitive eater has also helped me, thankfully, in becoming more like him too.
Wow, he sounds amazing.
Yeah, he
Um, I'm curious, when you were going through the part before your orthorexia, when you're going through disordered eating and all those patterns and habits, like at the beginning of the journey, did you have romantic partners?
I did.
And
I had
how
w I
okay.
had one relationship during that time period of my life. It wasn't like when I was in the very, very restrictive phase of my life, I was single and I felt so alone, and it was this kind of pattern where I was telling you, like, I did not feel worthy at all, and so I outsourced my, like, sense of self-worth to, like, looking a certain way or losing all
Right.
that weight, and it didn't bring happiness, right? It only brought more disconnection, but
Mm. Yeah,
the
do
relationship that I did have though, I just remember, like, that still definitely affected that relationship, and in a way where that relationship was not very conscious, and neither of us were conscious in that relationship, and so like, I just remember once that partner commenting like, "Oh, I noticed you haven't been going to the gym very much," or like, "You stopped working out, blah, blah, blah," and like that triggering things in me. And towards the end of our relationship too, he was going through like a very strict weight loss experience with a lot of
mm,
restriction, and that was very triggering to me.
wow.
So
Do you think that you sort of attracted each other because that's where you were on that journey?
maybe, I don't know. But I do think that towards the end, that was like a huge reason why like I started maybe like feeling more resentful, or like those triggers were like so hard for me and I didn't know how to work through them at
Yeah.
all. And so, yeah, it was just like I feel like I wasn't my higher self in that relationship, and there was a lot of learning, but maybe that was a
Yeah.
part of it too.
Mm. Thank you for
But it was all
sharing.
for growth also.
Yeah. The little bit that I know, just from like reading about your relationship to body image and disordered eating and things of that nature, are that most studies show that it's has a big correlation to, people not wanting to be intimate or have romantic partners. So I was like wondering if you feel like in that
Really?
time. Mhm. Yeah, just like the relationship to people who, especially like in younger demographics, who will like shy away from having sex even. It's much higher in people that are experiencing like
And I think
anorexia.
it's from that place of self-consciousness,
Mhm.
right? Of, like, being so self-conscious about your body that, like, you don't want someone else to see it, or, like,
Yeah.
only wanting to have sex, like, in the dark, or, like, I feel like it can kind of go into that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Did you experience some of that?
I think not as much, but I do think that when I was, like, in my really restrictive period, I was, like, not very experienced sexually at the time too. I was, like,
Mhm.
much
Yeah.
younger. So I remember I was, like, a lot more self-conscious for sure,
Yeah.
and not confident in my own body.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. This has been so
Of course.
enlightening. And again, like I said, you're so brave. And I think the one thing that I want to leave this conversation with for people who are listening, um, what is the best way to like, speak to people in your life who maybe you see struggling with these habits, or you notice they're displaying these sort of these habits or restricting themselves, and maybe on the sidelines are concerned that they might be struggling with disordered eating?
I think that's a super good question. It's also a hard question to answer because for the person, like from the perspective of someone who's been the person that was struggling, a lot of times if you're still in denial, like if you still think that what you're doing is good or all right, or that you aren't doing anything wrong at all, it can be really easy to be super stubborn and to not want to receive any comments from anyone else. And I know for me, my healing really came from like me taking personal
Mhm.
responsibility. Like the moment that I learned about self accountability, and I was like, okay, how am I showing up in my life? Like, not only in relationship to food, but in every single area of my life. How am I contributing to situations that are going on? Like, it was only when I took that seat that things started to really change in my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sad truth sometimes of, you know, people who are struggling with disordered eating, is that you can be in this very big denial phase. And the moment you move past it and you stop denying the fact that like you're contributing to this reality and that it's not the healthiest relationship you can have with your body, that's that shift has to happen. But I
Mm,
think the best thing you can do is be the example and like demonstrate a healthy relationship with your body in front of that person. Because
yeah.
then you can show to that person, like, what is possible in relationship with food.
Mm,
And I think that's the most powerful thing, because sometimes bringing it up can be very uncomfortable and the person might not receive it as well. So, because I
mhm.
know even from my point of view, like when my parents tried to call me out or have these conversations with me, I was like picking fights. Like I did not want to acknowledge it until I had that moment that I was like, I don't recognize myself. I need help.
Yeah, it had to come from within.
Yeah,
Carolina,
so that's
thank you
why
so
being the
much.
example.
Yeah, yeah.
You're so welcome. This has been so fun.
So amazing. We are excited to see what programs you create. So keep us in the loop. I am going to link your IG and everything else in the show notes so that people can find you and find, the episode of me on inner growth as well. Any last words for our listeners?
No, just thank you so much. And I mean, to anyone listening, if you are struggling with your body, if you're struggling with food, just know that you're not alone, and know that you have a friend in me, and my DMs are always open. And if I'm able to help in any way, please let me know. And just remember that like reaching out for support is a strength, and that while healing your relationship with food and your body can be very uncomfortable, it is worth it, because you unlock so much joy, you unlock so much freedom, and you unlock a stronger relationship with what you want in life and who you truly are, regardless of all the things you've been told that you're supposed to be or that you're supposed to look like.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Thank you so, so much for sharing. Yes. I can't
Yay.
wait to see what you do in this life. You have so much life ahead of
Thank
you.
you.
All right, loves, that's been another beautiful episode. As always, make sure that you are subscribed to the show so you never have to download it, and come hang out with us on Instagram where we share educational, fun, and sometimes funny content. Lovers, I will see you all next week.